Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This is going to be my spoiler-full review of Tom Wolfe's novel, The Bonfire of the Vanities. I titled this video, The Bonfire of the Vanities, The Great American Novel, because I think that's a good framework for understanding the book. If you haven't read it yet and you don't want to be spoiled, please tune out now. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who doesn't want to be spoiled by what I'm about to say. But just as that as a framework, the Great American Novel typically refers to works that, in one way or another, speak to the American experience, the American character, usually books that are specific to set in America and say something about our history and the people. So Great Gatsby is an example, Moby Dick, Grapes of Wrath, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen is a more recent example, Infinite Jest, Beloved by Toni Morrison, White Noise by Don DeLillo. So those are some examples, and if you look into any of those books, there are things that people can take from that, hold it up to saying something specific about American culture, American people. After reading this book, and I've read several of the books that I've just mentioned, this book for me, a lot of the critiques that Wolfe puts out about certain subsections of American society in New York specifically really spoke to me. So his critique of the media being an embellisher of facts, and him having a character like Peter Fallow who goes the extra step of making things up, embellishing stories, interviewing Maria Ruskin on the day of her husband's funeral, and then kind of ultimately taking money and not paying it back, skipping out on drinks, and just being kind of a raging alcoholic, and him kind of ending up probably the best off character in the novel. I don't know what Tom Wolfe is saying about that, but I think he's pointing to the lack of morals and scruples that someone in the media has and how it ultimately leads to success in that field. I think the character of McCoy, kind of the first scene in kind of the bonds trading room of these people who are just overly educated and consider themselves kind of the top of the world, and ultimately they're not really doing anything productive. And I think there's a scene in the book where McCoy can't really explain to his daughter what he does in an effective manner, and his wife's description of what he does kind of infuriates him. And I think kind of Tom Wolfe's kind of deft writing, because he takes someone who's ultimately really unlikable, and as time goes on through the novel and he's kind of put through the ringer of the criminal justice system, you ultimately feel sympathy for this guy, even though he does kind of horrible things throughout the book. And I think Wolfe's commentary there about kind of WASP society pretending to have like higher values or more morals, and I think he kind of just rips that away from him. And then all the stuff, the book is kind of dipped in the race relations in the 1980s, and coming not really just really white people and black people. You have all these subsections. You have the Jewish people and how they react to things, the Italians, the mayor I think is Jewish, and the Irish are a big part of the criminal justice system. And then all that stuff, the Reverend Beacon, I believe it's Beacon or Bacon, I think it's actually Bacon, they basically painted as a crook, as this guy who has false companies and is embellishing money from the church, but ultimately the question of whether or not he's doing it for the right reasons and trying to gain fairness and equity for people who are marginalized people. And in a system, when Wolfe kind of describes the criminal justice system in the beginning, it's the system that's really built for plea bargains. It's not really built for justice. It's really built for people to take the plea. Because you're talking about, I think the math was like 7% of the people who come into the system get actual trials, and everybody else has to plea out. And he basically has a story of the judge calling the defendant to the stand because his attorney is not there to defend him, and how mad he gets when the attorney is not there because it's costing him time. It's just all those things, and I think those are all things that to this day we still struggle with, and we can point to and say, really, have we? It's been 30 years, and these stories and these tensions are still as relevant today as they were then. And so I thought that even for a book that's old, there's certain parts of it, yes, that feel dated, but it just really struck me as something that was unfortunately prescient. He has a scene, just another example of the scene of Arthur Ruskin, Maria Ruskin's husband, in the restaurant, and he dies. And the waiter's reaction isn't really one of humanity or sympathy. It's get this guy out of here as quickly as you can so we can get the rich prime minister from, I don't know if it's Malaysia or Indonesia or what country it was from, but they're coming. You need to get this guy out. You need to get this guy out. And so even Fallow, who again is not really a morally clean character, even he struggled with that a little bit of, just the inhumanity of that situation. So I really, really enjoyed this book. I know that was a little bit of a rant, but I thought that if you've not gotten a chance to read this, you probably shouldn't have been watching the video because you probably just got spoiled, but I would implore you to get a chance to take a look at this because I think it's really strong writing. I think the themes are really handled well. Ultimately, the book is about a lot of different things, but I think ultimately I think it's a critique on, I think through McCoy you see, I'll back up. The Bonfire of the Vanities, what the title refers to, and I think ultimately what Wolfe is saying is, in I believe it was the Renaissance era, the church would take objects they felt were sinful and light them on fire and destroy them. And I think what Tom Wolfe is saying through McCoy is that through the destruction of his ego and his possessions and his pride, by destroying those sinful things, he ultimately becomes happy or satisfied with his life, even though materially he's stripped of all his material possessions. You see at the end of the book that he hasn't quite reconciled with his wife, but his wife at least is there and in the courtroom with him. And there's a sentence where he's described as smiling at his wife and giving her a signal. And I took that to mean you kind of see this guy be miserable this entire time and that he's kind of regaining his humanity, even though he's in what seems to be a worse place by most people's standards. So again, the book really spoke to me. I liked it a lot. That's just my quick 2 cents of it, tying the themes in the book to the overall themes of America. If you haven't gotten a chance, again, check it out. Feel free to leave me a comment in the comments section below. Feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Till next time, bye.